The number one reason farmers call us across the board, no matter what's happening in the world, no matter the time of year, is funding. Almost every single farmer that calls us is looking for some sort of financial assistance.
Hello, one and all, and welcome back to a brand new episode of The Rural Impact. I'm Michelle Rathman, and I thank you so much for joining us for another conversation that works hard to connect the dots between policy and rural everything. Okay, so I am recording this particular opener for you on Monday, November 3rd, 2025, which, if you are keeping count, is day 34 of a federal government shutdown. And at the heart of the matter is healthcare. Specifically, at issue are tax credits that have made health insurance more affordable for millions of people since the COVID-19 pandemic. Noting, of course, that the subsidies, which go to low and middle income people who purchase health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, are slated to expire at the end of this year if Congress doesn't extend them. So if Congress does allow these subsidies to expire, enrollees could see their premiums double. That's a pretty fair thing to say. All the experts that I'm talking to are indicating that, the charts and the models that I have seen. But healthcare is not the only issue on the table, of course, because as you also know by now, so too is food security, specifically funding the USDA administered Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, better known as SNAP, which 42 million people across this country rely on, including in rural. More about that in just a moment, because over the weekend, we learned that federal court rulings have mandated that the Trump administration must continue funding SNAP during the government shutdown, utilizing contingency funds allocated by Congress. Again, recording this on November 3rd, we also learned that the USDA officials have also told a federal court that it will tap into these contingency funds to allow states to issue partial benefits, just partial benefits under SNAP for the month of November. So a bit of a sigh of relief. I'm not sure I would put that into the good news or better news category, because we do know that this has really exposed just how widespread of an issue food insecurity is in America and the work that must be done to address the issue, including its prevalence in rural households across the U.S. So with that in mind, I'll thank you in just a moment, because I want to share with you something that I had been working on over the summer, long before the shutdown and the threats to SNAP funding occurred, because I was asked to co-author a policy brief for the National Rural Health Association, and I have been sitting on that policy congress. It's been an honor to do so for a couple of years, and I have been quite vocal about making the connection between health outcomes and access to nutrition, because if we're going to be serious about this and talk about make America healthy again, we also must be truthful about the fact that healthy cannot happen without factoring in nutrition. I've worked on many projects over the years where this is concerned, so it is quite the passion for me for many reasons. So last week, just a few days before the courts ordered the continued funding of SNAP, NRHA released that paper that I co-authored titled Nourishing Rural America, Policy Pathways for Food and Nutrition Security. Now, I'm going to put that link on our website. You can find it by visiting theruralimpact.com. Again, that's theruralimpact.com. And I sincerely invite all of you to visit the site, download this paper, which covers the topic of rural food insecurity and its relationship to policy extensively. And it includes a host of policy recommendations that we're asking Congress to consider moving forward. Again, it's filled with so much great facts and information, and so grateful to the folks at the National Rural Health Association who supported this project. Their research was invaluable. So before I introduce our guest for today's episode, I also want to ask you to keep something else in mind, that while there is temporary relief where nutrition assistance is concerned just for this month of November, We do know that with H.R. 1, now law, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that statutory changes to the program will reduce spending by more than $92 billion. That's billion with a B, over 10 years' time. And considering that 9 out of 10 counties with the highest food insecurity rates are rural, and that we have yet to see a new farm bill, which historically has addressed food security programs, well, let's just say we have some seriously important conversations and actions to take ahead of us where this matter is concerned. So, speaking of seriously important conversations, it is now time for me to tell you about the one I had last week for today's show, because we've really been wanting to talk with those who are on the front lines of farm policy. And because, as we know, America's farmers are the source of America's food, and it is most certainly a very challenging year for America's small farmers, family farmers, and for many reasons. And so to help unpack it, as they say, I invited Hannah Tremblay, Policy and Advocacy Manager at Farm Aid, and Caitlin Arnold Stephano, Hotline Program Manager, also from Farm Aid, to join us and to share more about their work, the issues concerning farmers, and how the work of Farm Aid is supporting farmers in these unprecedented, boy, I've been using that word a lot lately, unprecedented turbulent times for America's family farms. So now it is that time where I invite you to tune out that background noise and put it all that behind you just for the next 30 minutes or so and listen to my conversation with Hannah Tremblay and Caitlin Arnold Stephano from Farm Aid. Are you ready? I sure am. So let's go. Hannah Tremblay, Policy and Advocacy Manager at Farm Aid, and Caitlin Arnold Stephano, Hotline Program Manager, also at Farm Aid. To both of you, welcome to The Real Impact. We are really thankful to have you join us today for a really incredibly important conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm imagining you are both quite busy right now. So, Hannah, I want to first start with you because I've been working in rural spaces for over 30 years. And the first thing most people think about when they hear or see the word rural is agriculture. We know that it's so much more than that. However, it is the backbone of America. And at the same time, there is less than optimal understanding of how agriculture policy impacts all of our quality of life, those who are living in urban spaces as well. So, small and family farmers are taking a hit right now. And as I self-described, I went to the website Policy Geek. I first want to have you talk to us about the work of Farm Aid, because a lot of people recognize it as an amazing music festival that just passed from my home state of Minnesota. Why don't you give us a bigger, better picture of what Farm Aid is and what it does?
Yeah, absolutely. We are really well known for that annual festival, but we do work all year round to support family farmers. So we were founded in 1985 as a response to the 1980s farm crisis. At the time, they thought they would throw one concert that would solve the problem. But 40 years later, it's really clear that farmers still need our support. So year round, we're doing work that supports family farmers. We have a hotline and a farmer resource network, which provides immediate and effective support services for farmers who are in crisis or in need of support. We also have a distressed borrowers assistance network, which is training and recruiting a new generation of farm advocates and services in service of America's family farmers. We're also working to build the movement. So proceeds from our annual festival are then re-granted to organizations around the country that are working directly on the ground with farmers. We raised over $85 million in our organization's history and have granted out about 31 million of that to over 300 organizations nationwide. We also work to promote the food of family farms through our homegrown concessions at our festivals. We help strengthen local and regional markets and get family-grown food to concert venues and other venues. And then finally, we take action. So we work in coalition with regional and national organizations to advocate for fair farm policies that center a family farm vision of agriculture through grassroots campaigns and through bringing farmer voices into policymaking spaces.
The reach is far and wide. I have a very good friend who owns a small family farm in Massachusetts, and I just know how much it means to that community. This podcast does work to connect the dots between policy and rural quality of life. And so I want to just kind of talk about policy a little bit more with you before we move on to Caitlin, specifically about the Farm Bill. the elusive Farm Bill. You wrote a piece in September this year entitled Farmers and Communities Deserve a Better Farm Bill in 2025. And as we record this on October 22nd, we are no closer. And we know that H.R. 1, formerly known as the One Big Beautiful Bill, I debate that name, will have significant impacts on USDA programs, including SNAP, and already has. So if you could, because I talk to people and they still don't yet know exactly how all this is going to be impacting our America's small and family farms. So why don't you talk to us about what that piece is about and kind of what the calls to action are at this point? Is there anything we can be doing?
Yeah. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which I also struggle to use that name, the reconciliation bill that was passed in July, had some really big implications for the Farm Bill, which in turn impacts rural communities and farmers. So the reconciliation bill made deep cuts to SNAP. It also used those cuts to increase commodity subsidies. We know that rural communities are really dependent upon SNAP benefits. About 1 in 7, I think the statistic is, rural resident is food insecure. Mm-hmm. It affects about 15% of rural households. So these are programs that we know are directly benefiting rural communities. And then the using of that funding to then in turn fund commodity subsidies really breaks apart the Farm Bill coalition that has been in existence for the last several decades. There's historically been an acknowledgement and an understanding that food insecure Americans have interests that are tied to farmers across the country. That's what has brought legislators together to pass the Farm Bill for the last several decades. But because of those inclusions in the reconciliation bill, we really lost any incentive for both Democrats and Republicans to come to the table. And not having a new Farm Bill really negatively impacts farmers and rural communities as well. Mm-hmm. And when we think of the Farm Bill, we think of it just helping commodity farmers, maybe containing those nutrition programs, but it does contain so much more than that. The Farm Bill is how we fund agriculture research. It includes support for rural development, support for farmers, for farmer mental health. That's something that Farm Aid really cares a lot about. Support for local food systems. So when I wrote that piece about needing a new Farm Bill, even before the reconciliation bill, we knew that we needed a Farm Bill that addressed things like increasing impacts of climate change that we've seen since the passage of the last Farm Bill. Also, the ways in which COVID has laid bare the fragility and the gaps that exist in our food system. Those needed to be addressed. But after the reconciliation bill, we really need a Farm Bill that addresses the cuts that have been made to SNAP. We need to reverse those cuts. It also needs to address the cuts that have been made through DOGE, this administration, that have resulted in the loss of huge amounts of USDA staff, as well as cuts to programs that farmers are really dependent on. Yeah, we need a new Farm Bill now more than ever that addresses those important gaps.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit later about tariffs because, again, to me, it's just like this cascading. It's almost like a tsunami of events, and it's going to be awfully hard for us to dig ourselves out of this hole. Caitlin, I want to turn to you because you are the program manager for Farm Aid's Hotline. And first, tell us about the hotline. I did not know about the hotline until I started reading more about your work. So who is it serving and how? Let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So surprisingly, there are quite a few people who don't know that we run a farmer hotline. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're most famous for our annual festival, but we have had the hotline since 1985. It actually started as a 1-800 number, 1-800 Farm Aid, which is still the number for folks to call who wanted to donate to farmers, who wanted to support farmers. But then we started getting calls from farmers themselves who were needing support. So it became a sort of informal hotline for farmers to call. Over the years, it's become more formalized. And Hannah spoke quickly about farmer mental health and how some funds have been affected by the Farm Bill or not having a Farm Bill. The most important program in there for us, for the hotline, is the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, which came out of the 2018 Farm Bill. Mm-hmm. And this gave significant funds to the 4 regions in the country to create a basically farmer mental health and stress network of providers within the 4 regions. So Farm Aid became a subaward for both the West and the Northeastern region. And those funds helped us to get our hotline team to the capacity that we're at today, which is 4 hotline operators, myself, and my colleague who runs our Farmer Resource Network, which is our online clearinghouse of resources that farmers can access for free. So we are 100% dependent on the Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network funds to keep our hotline going. And since we haven't had a farm bill, we have been in sort of a holding pattern. The funds were also frozen in April for several months. They are back, they are unfrozen now, but we are now entering our 3rd sort of gap year of funding to keep that program going. The good thing about there's many good things about Farsan, but the most beneficial thing for Farm Aid has been that it has brought our capacity up to what we have now. We were able to expand our hotline hours, so we're open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday now. We serve any farmer, so we get calls from across the spectrum of farmers, all different types of farms, sizes of farms, beginning, established, young, old, multi-generation, first generation. So it really is, such a wide variety of farmers that reach out to us. The number one reason farmers call us across the board, no matter what's happening in the world, no matter the time of year, is funding. Almost every single farmer that calls us is looking for some sort of financial assistance. So that's really where a lot of our resources get put, is trying to find grants and other funding for farmers that they can access, which there are just not a lot of. There's not a lot of funding for farmers. So, and that was something that with, January 20th and all of the executive orders, the freezing of the conservation grants for farmers, we got a lot of calls around that time because farmers will often utilize those funds to do projects on their farms. They're a reimbursement system most often, so farmers need to pay out of pocket to do the projects that were in the contract, and then they get reimbursed from USDA. So we got a lot of panicked calls about farmers who had already paid for these projects and were now not knowing if they were going to get reimbursed.
Across the board, I have across my desk, I have in front of me all sorts of articles, and there's a quote from a farmer in a piece about the government shutdown. Yet another major blow to America's farmers. It says farmers don't shut down when times get tough, and neither should our government. I wonder I would come and just be a fly in the wall and just really understand what you just shared, was that people are talking about where the funds come from. And we know that nonprofits are also feeling the pain of kind of being under a microscope or under attack, if you will, for their good work.
Yes.
So between tariffs, between the shutdown, between the grants that were frozen, the on again, off again nature of it, tell us what the biggest need is. How can our listeners who have an interest, what is the biggest need? How can those of us out here help? I mean, clearly, financial support is probably front and center. Are there any other things that we can be doing on that end to support your work at that hotline? I can't imagine that your lifeline, really, it seems, at this point.
It really, yes. And that's why we need to keep it going no matter what. Even when the funds were frozen, we obviously kept answering the hotline, and we'll keep doing it. I think, I always tell folks that if they don't already know some farmers in their community, get to know some farmers, get to know their stories, get to know their struggles, the issues that they're facing. I think a lot of people just don't truly understand what a slim margin farmers are operating on. Most farmers are like one crisis, one disaster, one health issue away from not being able to pay their bills. I would say also just speaking up, calling your representatives, letting them know that you care about farmers, that you want your farmers in your community to be able to continue farming, that you go to the farmers market, you buy their products, you want them to be able to keep growing. I think the more people that can speak out and say, hey, we need our farmers. Our farmers help make our community better, and they make our food system more sustainable and more accessible for me. I think hearing from those individual voices is really important.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Hannah, I want to go back to you because, again, back on policy here, climate change and diminishing relief from disasters. I've got a piece in front of me that says states are missing billions of dollars in canceled disaster funds. It feels to me, and it has been this way for quite some time, that we come at problems by after the disaster has happened versus building resilient systems. So talk to us a little bit about how climate change and diminishing disaster relief is impacting small and family farms. I think it's just, you can't just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and get back at it again. These take look what happened in North Carolina with the floods. It takes resources and policy, good policy. So what are you all working on to help mitigate some of the disasters from policy?
Yeah, I think that's just right. I think there's a misunderstanding that when farmers are impacted by a weather disaster or a natural disaster, that someone comes in afterwards and makes them whole. But the disaster relief available for farmers is, on the whole, really inadequate. We have these insurance programs that a lot of the large commodity growers have access to, are able to utilize. But a lot of the farmers that we serve, the small and diversified family farmers, when they are impacted by a severe weather event, they often have no recourse following that. They can have done everything right for their whole season. And if you are impacted by a big hailstorm or a flood event, that can mean the end of your business.
I love that you brought in the I word, the insurance players in all of this, because they are at the table, but they're often missing. Mm-hmm. And so policy can change that. And while we're looking at policy, we take a look at federal policy, but I also take a look at state policy. We cannot let our state lawmakers off the hook when it comes to making sure that they do their part to create policy that is supportive of those small family farms. They may not be the big players, but they play an integral role in local economies. And so I'm wondering if you guys are taking a look at what policies maybe closer to home need to change, because the federal government right now is closed. And for the foreseeable future, I'm not predicting that we're going to see any magic happen before the end of the year. So let's talk about policy at more local level. What can be done there? How do we advocate for our small farmers at the local level?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is a question that we have also taken a look at with regional partners in the area, especially in the Southeast, who have been impacted by Hurricane Helene, as well as in the Northeast. A lot of those farmers have seen impacts from big floods in the last couple of years. And with the federal government being in the state that it currently is, have also turned to state government for potential solutions. I do think there is the ability for state governments to prop up funds and programs that would provide for disaster relief for their small farmers in the wake of climate disasters. I do think that the scale of these problems and the relief required following disasters is often out of the scope of state funding. That is why it is so important for us to fix the Farm Bill and to improve the federal safety net for farmers. We know there are some programs that could be improved upon that do currently exist. The Whole Farm Revenue Protection Program currently is the program that probably serves small and mid-sized farmers best. It protects the whole operation instead of having a farmer insure one crop at a time, which is often not feasible for a small scale farmer who's growing many different crops, sometimes on the scale of a fraction of an acre per crop. So we're looking to advocate for the improvement of existing programs like that, as well as looking to states, but with the recognition that this is a system-wide problem that's going to require solutions that are bigger than any one state is probably going to be able to provide.
Absolutely. A couple of the things I want to make sure that we touch on. The CEO of Land O'Lakes said, and I mentioned this in another episode, that we're facing a potential black swan event and that was focused on immigration and immigration policy and how that's impacting. We know it's impacting large scale operations. We know it's impacting food processing plants and so forth. Can either one of you talk to us about immigration and workforce and how that is impacting? Because I don't assume anything. Labor is labor, and it's hard to come by. These are skilled jobs. Much to most people's surprise, this is not for the faint of heart. Farming is hard work. How is immigration policy impacting small farms right now?
I would say, on the hotline, we have heard from some people who are looking for resources on what to do if ICE shows up at their farm. I think farm owners are feeling concern about the current workers that they have and how to protect them and what their rights are if ICE does come to the farm. We also run a Spanish hotline, which we started in October 2022, so 3 years ago now. That's run in partnership with the Migrant Clinicians Network, which is another national organization who they work more with migrant health of all type of migrant workers, not just farm workers, but we partner with them to run our Spanish hotline. And the calls we've gotten there, even before what's happening now, were often about fear of ICE and fear of being deported and understanding their rights, obviously, when it comes to labor laws. Mm-hmm. I think even without the immigration question, farm labor is so challenging for farm owners. Not a lot of people want to work on farms. I was a farmer for 12 years out of college, and is the hardest job I've ever done and never will do. And it's, I think a lot of young people now are not super interested in that. And, you're just not going to make very much money. And it is such a physically demanding, mentally demanding job. So with or without immigration, I think it's just very challenging to find farm labor across the board for small farms too. Even farms who only need a few folks, I think it's hard.
Yeah. My family were farmers in Minnesota, and needless to say, it didn't get passed down to generations because nobody wanted it. And that is the harsh and it's the reality. One last topic before my closing question here, which is the USDA reorganization. I've mentioned to our listeners that I had the privilege of working on a policy paper with my work with the National Rural Health Association, focused specifically on food security. It's 12 pages, and we do talk about the challenges of USDA reorganization just in terms of closing field offices. And I know that was also written into the piece that I believe that you wrote, Hannah. So talk to us about what you foresee. It's already happening because the reorganization was announced, is happening. What will be the ripple effect, if you will, for family farms with this reorg?
Yeah, we're really concerned about the proposed reorganization. We know the USDA has already been impacted by a big reduction in staff since January. Mm-hmm. Since January, they've lost about 18,000 employees. They anticipate that the reorganization plan would result in about 30,000 more lost. For those who don't know what the reorganization plan entails, it entails closing many of the field offices and relocating about half of staff who are currently located in DC to one of 5 regional USDA hubs. Mm-hmm. USDA tried this under the first Trump administration. In 2019, the USDA relocated the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. That resulted in the loss of about half of the staff for both of those agencies, and both those agencies are still recovering from that loss of staff and expertise. So we know that when we force the staff to relocate, they often don't relocate. We just lose that expertise in the staff. What I worry about is specifically the loss of NRCS staff, the National Resources Conservation Service. Those are the USDA employees who help farmers implement conservation practices on their farm. They provide technical assistance to farmers. Those services are really important for rural communities who benefit from increased water and soil quality that they are able to have when farmers are enacting conservation practices on their farms. I also worry about Farm Service Agency. They've lost a significant number of staff since January as well, and will also likely lose staff under the organization plan. The Farm Service Agency is the agency in charge of administering loans and payments to farmers, along with the changes under the reconciliation bill, which we know changes of subsidy payments. They're already facing some big upheavals, and also these disaster relief programs that have been proposed. One was passed last December. They're still struggling to administer that. We know we'll likely see more financial aid as a result of the tariffs. Trump has already talked about potentially rolling out more financial relief. The Farm Service Agency struggles to function as is. I can't imagine that those additional burdens are going to make it more effective. And I worry that farmers who are just seeking their basic financial help will not receive it.
All of the issues that we're talking about here today, I really cannot impress enough how imperative it is that we all pay much, much more attention, because at the end of the day, what is on your table, it literally, it doesn't drop from the sky, and we need to support our small farms across this country. Before we go, closing question to you both. I mean, we're all about advocating as well. We know that being vocal helps. We know that voices and numbers make a difference. Letter writing and so forth. What tool or strategy can each of you kind of pull out of your toolkit for the person who may not have any connection, but now says, you know what, I need to pay more attention. What can we do to advocate on behalf of those whom you serve?
I would say, I mentioned earlier that we grant make across the country. We are connected to hundreds of organizations. There are organizations that exist in every state that are doing really important work supporting farmers and advocating for fair farm policy. I would suggest that listeners get acquainted with those organizations in your state. They are usually plugged into advocacy work. They know the work that needs to be done, and they know how to support farmers in your community. I would get in touch with the organizations and give them your support.
Excellent. Well, you're going to put links on our website at theruralimpact.com to make sure people can navigate that quite easily. Caitlin, any last words, any words of advice to help us support your work at the hotline?
Yeah, again, get out and actually get to know the farms that are in your neighborhood, your community. Start shopping local if you don't. Start going to farmers markets. The more people that are actually buying local farm products, the more those farmers are able to keep growing, and they feel the support too. I think we need to have a greater recognition of how hard farming is and the sacrifice that farmers make in order to bring us food. And so I think just starting to treat farmers with more respect and getting to know a little bit more about what it means to be a farmer in the U.S. today.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I had a conversation on another episode where someone said, I'm so tired of farmers being beat up saying, hey, this is what you all voted for and so forth. That's not helpful. Yeah. No. It's not helpful at all. And so I do appreciate that. To both of you, Caitlin, Hannah, wonderful to have you here. Please keep us posted. We are going to make sure that, again, that we put links to everything that you're doing on our website, and to the rest of you. Even though we had to say goodbye to you both, stay with us. I'll be back with you with some parting words in just a moment.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear rural? Is it agriculture, recreation, country, or maybe even elections? Rural can't be defined by one word, one place, or one population. However, we can connect the dots between rural quality of life and policy. And that's what the Rural Impact is on a mission to do. If your organization advocates for rural policies that contribute to thriving rural communities, we invite you to join our partner network. By joining us, you can tap into a wealth of resources, expertise, and a network of like-minded organizations. Discover how we can help you expand your rural reach and share your impact. Visit theruralimpact.com to connect with us. That's theruralimpact.com.
My thanks to Hannah and Caitlin for joining us. I do hope that what you heard today was inspiring to you to reach out to a family farm in your community. Let them know how much you support them. All ways possible, please show them your love and thank them for the food that they afford us to put on our tables. With that said, we'll be watching farm policy very closely in the coming weeks and months, and we'll be sure to invite others back to kind of update us and let us know where things stand. Hopefully the government shutdown will end very soon and America's small and family farms can begin to recover so many things that they have lost to date. So with that said, I also want to make sure that you go to our website, because that's where we're going to put all the resources that we talked about here today, including the policy paper that I share with you and the opener and that which Hannah and Caitlin shared with us. A reminder that when you're on our website, you can hit that subscribe button to make sure that you get our e-blasts, which kind of recap our shows and let you know what's happening next. And speaking of what's happening next, it is the month of November, which means that on November 20th, which is the third Thursday of the month, is National Rural Health Day. And we have got a very special event planned for that. Stay tuned. I will tell you that earlier this year, I traveled the entire state of Massachusetts and visited, I think, 12 different rural communities across Massachusetts. And I'm just going to share with you that you are going to meet some of those individuals that I had the privilege of spending time with while I was there. So stay tuned to The Rural Impact, our social media feeds. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and we'll be sharing more information about our very special live stream National Rural Health Day event. With that said, a real quick thanks to Sarah and Bria for all their hard work behind the scenes. You know them by name, but by first name by now. They really do make the magic happen behind the scenes. So with that, I'm going to invite you to take really good care of yourself and to the best of your ability, those around you, until we see you again on a brand new episode of The Rural Impact.